And welcome to Habs Unfiltered, episode 184. I am your host, Blaine Putvey. I'm joined now by my co-host, Matt Smith.
Good
How's it going,
evening.
Matt?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Oh, can't complain. No one will listen. For those listening, you'll notice that Treg Wilson is not with us at the moment. Unfortunately, he's had some work issues pop up, so he's taking care of that. So he won't be with us for this episode. However, in the second half of this episode, we're going to be joined by Kevin Porter. Kevin Porter is, if anyone's followed me on social media, you'll notice he posts a lot of training videos where he's working towards earning a PTO for a professional hockey team. There's going to be a special on Hollywood scene. There a 4-part docu-series on his efforts to earn a professional contract. So we'll be talking to Kevin in the second half. So this first half, we're going to talk a little bit about some news around the league. Training camps are opening up, so players we're going to look at, and a little bit of chatting about the prospects and some background to that. But we'll start with the news about capacity at the Bell Center for this season. So Eric Engels on September 8th, which was yesterday as we're recording, announced on his Twitter feed that the Canadian season ticket holders have been advised that the Bell Center will host up to 7,500 fans and will be divided into zones of 500 people. The capacity being subject to review over the course of the season, and the possibility looming that evolving health policy will lead to full capacity. Admission to the Bell Center will be exclusive to double vaccinated people aged 13 years and older, or children aged 12 and under. Anyone 13 or over will have to present proof of double vaccination through a VaxiCode QR code that they have in Quebec, and official identification. So that's set. I know it's a political hot potato to talk about the vaccine passports, but anybody with children know that we've been providing immunization cards for our kids to schools for a century. So I think it's the right idea.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think it's interesting that while you're reading that out, I was just waiting to hear a certain little bit of news from that, and it didn't show up, and that was the proof of negative test. It really seems that it's you're vaxxed or you're not coming in.
Yeah.
Which you know what? It's the safest route. So I'm all for it. I'm all for it. And the sooner the better that we have more people in those seats, the better. We saw during the playoffs when it was 2,500, 7,500. It's going to be that next level. But obviously we're used to seeing a full house in the Bell Center anytime we've been there for a game. So hopefully we can lead to that as soon as possible.
Well, 7,500 will feel like 75,000. Swear to God.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I know the politics of this. It's a hot potato, like I mentioned. I personally believe it's the right course. If you disagree with me, that is fine. If you don't want to be vaccinated, you as in, general you, not you specifically, Matt.
Yeah.
If someone disagrees with that point of view and they don't want to be vaccinated, that's their call. That's their choice. You're not there's no mandate forcing you to be vaccinated, and nor will you ever be. However, like anything else, there's consequences to actions. And just like if you were like, you need a license to drive. That's a piece of paper. That's an identification. That's proof, of something. So, legally, they're allowed to do this. So it's just one of those things. It's just another step in our society. It's just here. So
like, for instance, like for these new NHL governed COVID rules. Like this one's specific to the Canadian, to the Bell Center and the Canadians.
Yeah.
But we've already seen within the NHL that, well, I'll throw it out there. Rocky Thompson, right, was a assistant coach or associate coach. I believe he was an associate coach with San Jose.
Yeah.
And he's unable to receive the vaccine due to an undisclosed medical reason. And under the new mandate for the league, under the new protocols, he's not permitted to fulfill his duties as a coach behind the bench, and he had to step down.
Yeah, and that's because of his close proximity to the players.
That's right.
In that position.
That's right.
Now, as someone who's just buying tickets to go to a game, there's clearly medical reasons why some people can't be vaccinated.
Absolutely.
And from my understanding, that is included. It's taken into account when it comes to these QR codes. And
that's right. So because under the new league rules, any person that goes within 12 feet of the players has to be vaccinated.
Correct.
Right. So it's pretty specific.
Yeah. And they're a private company, and they're just protecting their assets, and the players are ultimately an asset for the league.
Yeah.
So I think we've spent enough time on that. We'll move on to the next step. And we were just talking about players. So training camps are coming up real soon. The Canadians are going to start their preseason on the 25th of September, playing against the Leafs. I believe it's a split squad game, but either way, NHL hockey. So who's a player at the Canadians camp that's really someone you want to watch?
For me, it's going to be Romanov. I want to know if he's going to be able to take the next step. Sat out most of the playoffs, but he showed some flashes throughout the season. I think that he's going to have a lot to prove, and bringing a guy like Savard that can play a hard-nosed defensive style. Romanov is very much a defense first, but we know that he's got some offensive flair. And I think that he's going to want to jump into that next level of taking his offensive game forward while still polishing out those aspects of his defensive game. And I believe with having someone like Savard as a defense partner, I believe he'll be able to take that next step.
If he is paired with Savard, I agree. That would probably be the best course of action to allow him to grow his game. For him, I'm going to be watching that sophomore slump. You know, it's the second year. He only played 4 games in the playoffs last year out of the 22 that the Canadians had. So my concern is, will he be able to showcase his offensive game enough to earn that top 4 role? I think he should be given that chance early in camp. You know, let him run with it. Let him try things, because after Jeff Petrie, who's available to play that puck mover role?
Well, let's just say after the Petrie and Edmondson pairing, after that, the pairings are can be mixed up. Some people want to see Sherratt thrown in with Savard, kind of like the Weber duo that they had. And some people want to see a little bit more offense with Romanov, or a little bit more speed, let's just say that, than Romanov.
It definitely a lot more mobility in that. I mean, and you're not losing the physicality side. So
no, not at all.
And he's strong positionally on defense. It's just the offensive game. Like he's not going to ever be a real big point producer. I figure like a 30-point kind of defenseman is, you know, what we're looking at. But after Jeff Petrie, there's no real big puck movers. I mean, you got Brett Kulak, and then Chris Widener.
That's right.
Who are both bottom pairing guys.
Yeah.
So you don't really have anyone that can jump into a second pair, and that's what the Canadians need. So Romanov's going to be I think the top pick for that. I know Norlinder's coming to camp, and that's someone that a lot of people want to get an eye on.
Absolutely. And he's a guy that can come in and he can, we've seen a lot of videos of him and how he can produce on the power play. And that's something that the Canadians have had a weakness in that position for a long time.
Yeah.
However, is he ready to jump into the NHL? Maybe not so much, but
Yeah. He's got to
with a
adjust
with
the
a
North American game too.
but with a strong camp, he could make the squad. However, and I know we're going to get into this, a strong camp just can't sometimes isn't enough just to jump in, and we've seen that with other players before.
Yeah.
So hopefully the coaching staff really looks in management really looks into the players at camp and that shine at camp, and then look at the bigger picture as well, and not rush
Yeah.
someone into a position that maybe they're not ready for.
Looking down the road, what's best for the individual as well as the
Absolutely,
team.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We don't want another like. I'm not gonna put a hit out there on Mete, but it was very much a need. That's the reason he made the team, and he did have a very good camp. But we
Yeah.
saw that, maybe his defensive game wasn't the best, even though statistically he's the best defenseman ever play hockey. But yeah,
Yes, he is.
yeah,
For me, however, at this camp, I mean, everybody wants to see what Cole Caulfield can do. He can
absolutely.
keep going, but um, I think for me, if we're really, the one real name that I think we should all be watching is Drouin. I
Yeah,
want to see how Jonathan Drouin does,
yeah.
because
It was
after
nice just to see him at the golf tournament the other
yeah,
day, and just
exactly.
to see him around his teammates, and smiling and having a good time with them, and anyone that spoke of him had some really good things to say. So yeah,
Yep.
he's definitely on my list as well.
And this was announced today as we record. It's Thursday the 9th. Chantal Maccabi at RDS is going to have a one-on-one interview with Jonathan Drouin that's going to air on the 20th of September. So I believe that's the second day of camp. So that's something to look forward to. But when camp opens and when he actually starts hitting the ice for games, for me, I want to see how he responds. You want to ease him in, but you also need to test out where he fits best in the lineup. So letting him play a game with Suzuki on a line, letting him play a game with Dvorak on a line, because they were talking about Dvorak. He does well with a playmaking winger. Well, that'd be a good fit, but let's see how they do. And then even trying with Evans or Paling for a game. Let him play all like 4 to 5 games in the preseason. Try it out, see if he can build some chemistry, and kind of ease into the season. You don't want to be putting the pressure on him to produce right away, because then it opens him up to criticism, and the media could just start the ball rolling again, because you know how it gets. One negative comment becomes 10, becomes 100.
Especially with a
And
French speaking player.
exactly, a local guy who maybe made a mistake on a back check or something. It's the most minor thing, especially in a preseason game.
Yep.
It could end up causing an issue. So you let him kind of ease into things. And once he starts producing, take him out of these sheltered positions and give him a little bit more. Because if he's producing, they won't complain as much. So kind of ease them into it. That's what I'm going to be looking for at camp.
I'll take a good look at Dvorak as well. Like
Yeah.
I know he was given a big role in Arizona, but however, it seemed that he was, right for the picking if anybody wanted him. And
Well, they're looking. Yeah.
Montreal jumped in pretty quick and picked him up. So I'd like to see the role that he's going to be given, but it looks like Montreal's going to go into the season with a that is their 1-2.
Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Are they look for him? Are they looking for him to be a Danault replacement, a hybrid of a top 6 center versus a shutdown center, like the traditional second line center who can produce points and kind of match up against their second and third lines? Or are they looking for a guy who's going to take Danault's place and match up against top lines? Like, is that what they're looking for?
I think it's going to be a little bit of both. I think you're going to see a guy like Evans maybe take the next step forward in his career as well and be given a little bit more opportunity. So he might be more of the Kotkaniemi replacement, and then Dvorak kind of a hybrid of the two. And who knows? Like, there's still time between now and camp We might see a PTO. There are guys still available on the UFA side. For me, a name would be Bozak that they might take a look at. Veteran guy, can win faceoffs, can kill penalties, etc. That might be someone that they might look at either as a PTO, or they might just all sign him to a cheap contract. He's made money throughout his career. He's won a cup, etc. He's probably willing to sign cheap if he wants to continue to play hockey.
Yeah, he can join the Blue Notes North, all the friggin' Blues that are moving north now.
Yeah.
Again, that for him, a PTO or a contract, it depends on what management and the coaching staff feel Paling's going to bring to the table. Because you have Evans, after Stefan Waite's comments in the media at 98.5 this week, mentioning they see Evans as a replacement for Danault. So he's clearly in their plans. Bergevin talking at his last press conference about, Paling having a legitimate chance to make the club and what they expect from him. So, maybe they don't sign anybody and they just go with the young guys. But that kind of goes against the grain with the GM like Bergevin, who loves his veterans.
That's right.
But then again, he did just trade a first-round pick for the first time in his tenure to get a center.
Yeah.
So is he done, or is that just a signal that he sees the center line for the Canadians being ultimately important this season? Can go either way on that.
Well, I don't think anyone really projected. You get a team that go to the Stanley Cup final. I don't really think that we projected them to lose as many players as what they did. And like the big one, obviously for me, was Shea Weber. Nobody really knew. That was a really big bomb that dropped.
Yeah.
That hey, you guys are going to be without your captain. He's probably never going to play again. And Bergevin was very quick to respond to the question, will you name an interim captain? And he flat out said no.
Yeah.
So I think they're trying to see if Weber is going to be able to return. He definitely didn't seem too confident when he was asked the first time.
I mean, it's pretty obvious they hope he does, but
I think they're leaving all those avenues open.
Yeah,
and they don't want to throw a C on somebody's sweater and then he comes back and yeah.
I mean, that could be that could be a twofold reason. One, they maybe hope he comes back, or two, they want to give enough of a gap between this captain and the next.
Yep.
It could be that as simple as that. Now we were talking about Jake Evans, and you kind of alluded to it when it came to prospects, when we were talking about Norlinder. This is one question that's been brought up to me a few times online, and I thought it would be a good topic for the show. And that's, do we put too much pressure on our prospects too soon?
Depending on the prospect, absolutely. Or if it's a need, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I brought up the case of Mete. We can even say the same thing about Kotkaniemi. We were at the draft when Kotkaniemi was picked. We were also at the draft that Mete was picked.
Yeah, we were.
All right. So that was the same year Sergachev was picked. With Mete, as I said, he has strong camp. They needed a puck-moving, mobile defenseman on the left-hand side. Nobody expected him to start the season paired up with Shea Weber. It happened though. And then you look at the with Kotkaniemi. Was it a reach picking him? It might have been. They definitely went out and they picked for need. And we all know that they went out and picked for need for a center position, given the players around them that were available. Obviously, no longer with the Canadians. But it was another guy. He had a strong camp, and it was, how can we not put this guy in? And his strongest season so far has been his rookie season. And then since then it's been slumps, inconsistency, and some injuries. Yeah, during the playoffs, it seems that he's their best goal scorer. Or was their best goal scorer.
Yeah, well, he did step up his game in the playoffs, but at this offensively.
But he still showed slumps.
He was still highly inconsistent, which,
yeah,
I mean, let's be honest, at his age, makes sense.
That's right.
So, I
and a
mean,
lot of people are blaming the coach. A lot of people are blaming Bergevin. A lot of people, like even in the playoffs last year, they're blaming Eric Stahl. And I said, well, if you're not playing up to the standard of the coaching staff, you're not playing up to standard. Like look at Tatar. Tatar's a hell of a player during the season. He didn't put up the points, but he wasn't in those matchups. He wasn't out there to be the goal scorer. He was playing the matchup lines on the Dano line, and that line did a very good job of doing that when he was playing.
yeah, and come playoff time, he just didn't seem able to match that intensity level.
Yeah.
Continue with his offensive production or keep up on the defensive side.
Yeah.
So he sat, and it's not like it's something new. It's happened on a few occasions with the Canadians, with the Golden Knights, with Detroit. So
I'll go back really quick on developing their prospects. I know a lot of people were very against them bringing in Jake Allen because they thought Caden Primo was going to be the next guy to come up and jump in and be the guy and at least be a two to Carey Price. We've seen some very good things at the AHL level. We've seen a little bit of highs at the NHL level when Primo's been in, but ultimately he's not ready yet. And I think that another year in the AHL would be very beneficial for his career.
You look at the prospects that have come up for the Canadians, all the young players, and the ones that seem to become solid NHL players and kind of meet those projections are the ones that have spent some time in lesser leagues, not necessarily
Absolutely.
not just the AHL, but like
yeah.
Lehkonen, for instance. They left him in Finland for a couple of years. He came in, and then boom, he is a solid NHL player.
Yeah. So Jake Evans. Jake Evans was drafted in 2014.
Yeah.
Out of the OJHL. And if people don't know what the OJHL is, there's a team in Trenton, Ontario that's OJHL team, which is it is not the highest level of hockey. For me, it's a step. It's like a step down from like the OHL and the Q and that kind of stuff.
But when he was picked, they let him mature in the NCAA for 4 full years.
That's right. Yeah.
Then he played in the AHL for 2 full years. They left him be. They let him mature and develop.
Yep.
And then he met that requirement. Now so I mentioned Lehkonen.
Lehkonen.
Romanov is another one who played in the KHL for a couple of years before he came over, and he looked really good last year. He's still super young, so we're going to see what he's going to do next. But it's those types of players that are left. Nick Suzuki, perfect example.
Yeah,
he was left to play in junior for 2 more seasons, and then he stepped into the NHL, and look at him going now.
Yeah, so, he was lighting it up at every level in the OHL and just in the regular season, the playoffs, etc. And
he was a beast in the Memorial Cup. I watched him play every game at the Memorial Cup live.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
Yeah.
So it's these players that have been given a little bit more time to mature, not just physically, but also mentally, learning the game, growing into their bodies. The ones that have been brought into right away, guys like Galchenyuk and Kotkaniemi, those are the ones that seem to trip, especially with the expectations that are piled onto them.
Yeah. Here, congratulations. You're a top 6 or top 9 center with the Canadians.
Yeah.
Hope you can keep up.
We don't have any of those, so ta-da.
Yeah, the big thing for me, and it's you're probably going to agree with this statement. No one gives a fuck about players out of the second round or out of the first round.
No, it seems to be the case.
You look at all the media. You look at all the media. Like, look at this year. Logan Maya. Not going to get into him. Controversial pick. A lot of people are saying that they shouldn't have made the pick. We'll just leave it at that. Okay. Caden Gooley. Caden Gooley is going to be a nice defensive prospect. He's likely he's going to be my pick for the World Juniors captaincy. That's probably going to happen. Cole Caulfield, obviously, is going to be a top 6 guy on the Canadians this year. Then you start going down the list. They just lost Kotkaniemi. Paling, drafted in 2017. He's got 28 games of experience so far. Showing some flashes, right? Showing some flashes. We'll see what comes from there. Then you start going down the list. Sergachev in 16, traded for Drouin. You got 15 with Juleson, picked up on waivers from Florida. Sherbak, gone. Another guy that was picked up on waivers by the Kings, I believe. McCarron, traded in a package that brought John Scott to Montreal. No, that was Tenorti.
That was Tenorti, yeah.
That was Tenorti.
He was traded for
Dauphin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you got Galchenyuk, 2012. Another guy traded for Domi, which turned into Anderson. So I think that ended up working out pretty well. And then, Bolya is there in 11. Tenorti's there in 10. Infamous Louis LeBlanc in 2009. So
David Fisher.
Right. Fisher before that. Or no, it was Christo before that.
Well, Christo was a second round pick.
Oh yes, he was. He was just their first pick of that draft.
Yeah.
But a lot of the finger pointing comes to first round picks. It's not really necessarily development. It's first round pick development. What the Canadians have done and who's within the organization, who's still in the organization, who's been what in the organization, etc.
When it comes to that, oh my God, look at the first round picks. They're all gone. Blah 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 blah. You look at all the other NHL teams, and for the most part, it's the same. About 75% of the picks that they picked in the first round are gone.
Yeah.
It's the average is about the same. But at the end of the day, does it really matter where the person was picked? The whole goal of the draft is to find NHL players. So each year you're going to want one or two who end up being NHLers.
Yeah. And I'm not saying this to defend the Montreal Canadiens or anything like that. However, from 2010, okay, so they picked Tenorti 22nd, Bolya 17. He's still in the NHL. Tenorti is to a capacity as well.
Yep.
Galchenyuk's waiting for a contract right now. He's
been fixed.
Right. He's been fixed by the Leafs, but still waiting for a contract. McCarron, 25th overall, Sherbak 26. And what pisses me off is when people start saying so for instance, the year that Sherbak was drafted. Okay. The year Sherbak was drafted, he was drafted 26th overall. And everyone's like, well, they could have got David Pastrnak. David Pastrnak was picked 25th overall. He was already gone. So that argument is completely mute. So I'm not defending them at all, but you start getting these end of the first round draft picks. You're not getting the more surefire thing of getting a top 5 pick. Montreal has had a couple. They've had a top 10 in Sergachev, as I said, turn into Drouin. Kotkaniemi's no longer with the team. Sometimes the draft's a shot in the dark. It is what it is.
Yeah. The chances of being an NHL player clearly are higher the higher you're drafted.
Oh, very much so.
But the importance, it's not just, you can't really say, oh my God, they failed at the draft because those players aren't here anymore. Well, yeah, the scouts wanted this guy, they drafted this guy, but they're not the ones that trade the guy away. That's on the GM.
That's right.
So you can complain all you want that they've been horrible on the draft, but a lot of the players they've picked are still solid NHL players. They may not be stars, but they're still in the league. They're still producing. I mean, guys like Sherbak, for instance. He was picked, like you mentioned, way later in the first round. And when you get to that point, you're looking at like a 25 to 50% chance of even making it. He didn't. I mean, for whatever reason, he didn't. He was just missing something. And it wasn't like the Canadians are the only team that said, you know what, we're going to pass on this guy. So
a player that I always looked at was Zach Fucale. And I know you've seen Zach Fucale play quite a bit.
Yeah.
Fucale was a guy that could likely go in the first round. The year that he got drafted, he got 45 wins that year, playing on a very stacked Halifax team, which
won a Memorial Cup.
Right. Won a Memorial Cup. And Fucale played at the juniors for 2 years, etc. It was very good for them. But he was a second round pick. And people thought, this is a guy, he's from Laval, he's going to do this, he's going to be a future Canadiens goalie, etc. He was drafted in 2013, still never played the NHL. And
Well,
yes,
yeah.
he's made strides, and he's playing a hell of a lot better than what he was. But with Washington's organization right now in Hershey, and this year had very good numbers. He was 9-2 in 11 games with a 932 save. But you look at the prospects in rushing them. Some of it's to do with positional need. Some of them is to do with the draft themselves,
Yeah,
and
the
then some
approach
of
with the
it's
draft.
and then some of them is some of it's to do with, well, he speaks French.
Well, have you noticed that in the recent drafts in the last 2-3 years, the Canadians have been doing a little bit better
They
with
have.
the outcomes, and there's a reason. They've changed their approach to the draft. They're doing the shotgun method. So they said, okay, well, we're going to identify centers and defensemen that we require.
Yep.
And then they just go and they pick as many of one as they can. So in that specific year, they'll end up with probably 2 or 3 players and a centerman they can move to the wing, like Jan Mysak.
Yep.
They're looking at him. He was drafted as a center, probably going to end up as a winger.
Yep.
And it's the same draft year as Luke Tuck, who lit up his first year in the NCAA.
Yep.
He's looking like he'll be an NHL player in the bottom 6.
Yep.
Caden Gooley. So there's 3 guys that have legitimate NHL chances right now. So the approach they took is a little bit different. It's what other teams have been doing. Like Dallas has done that, and everyone loves their drafting.
Yeah.
But for the Canadians, it's not the drafting; it's the development side of the house. And we had people tell us online recently that the Canadians don't have a team of coaches specifically for development, which was a complete falsehood.
Absolutely.
We corrected them.
Definitely do.
We corrected them.
And they have a sports science individual and everything like that. And it's just a new person in that position now. It was Allard right up until this year.
And Pierre Allard was the first person to implement that plan on an NHL team. So the Canadians began that. Other teams took that and went with it. And we can argue that other teams have done a much better job, but we can't argue the fact that the Canadians don't have that and aren't using it. For me, it's the application of that sports science to each player. Are they tailored enough? Like how they, for me, it's more providing the players what they need, but giving them the time to mature into those tools that they're providing. You got to be mature enough to take that tool and use it.
Absolutely.
That's what I see as the one major issue with the Canadians. If they can adopt that old Detroit Red Wings style, remember back in well, you may not because you're so young, but the 90s, when they pick a guy, they draft a guy, they make him mature in the minors for a couple of years before he's even called up.
Yep.
That's the approach the Canadians are going to have to start taking.
And maybe build up some of this chemistry with some of their players within some of these lesser leagues. So when they're ready to come up, hey, I already know this guy.
Exactly. I understand the team system. I know what kind of role, like you've grown into the role that they want you to fill. So if you're drafted to be a top 6 center, you play top 6 center in the lesser leagues. Learn your role, learn what you need to do, build that chemistry, and then when you finally get called up, you have that confidence, you have that experience that you can rely on when you have to play at a faster pace. Because that's that big. It's a bigger jump than people expect when you go from the AHL to the NHL. It's a huge jump in pace.
Yeah.
So if you have that confidence before you make the leap, you're the better for it. Mm-hmm. So that's my issue with the Canadiens development plan.
You also look at it, and I know we're getting onto our our next segment soon.
Yeah.
The one thing for me is the fact that the team in the AHL was awful for years. If you're
Yeah.
not part, and the thing is, you're not part of a winning mentality. You're not part of a winning team. You've got rotating parts going in and out. You've got constant call ups in and out. You're not put into a position to succeed. It's like, okay, you were the first line guy or second line guy or top pair guy in Laval, or Hamilton or wherever the hell they were playing, St. John's, etc. Um, you were doing your role in that team. Now, okay, you're a fourth line guy, or you're a 6-7 guy in the Canadians. We need you to go out, crash bang. We need you to do this and that. Where it might not be your forte to do that. You might not be able to develop at that role or succeed in that role. And then people look at you and they say, well, why the hell did we call this guy? Yeah, we can't do anything. Then he goes back to a lesser league and say, oh, well, he's a career AHL or whatever. Now you've got, obviously, we've got a new coach in place in Laval, after a very successful year last year under Bouchard, who moved on to Anaheim's organization. We'll see what happens. Right now, the future's bright, in my opinion. You look at the prospects. We named a few of them. You got Norlinder, Struble. You've got Sean Farrell, Luke Tuck, Cooley, etc.
Harris.
Yeah, Harris. The future's bright. To give these guys an opportunity to shine. Don't rush them. They'll just be fine. Some of the guys I named are definitely be NHL players. And even if a few of them light it up in the cage or in the AHL for a few years, so be it. It might turn into another Jake Evans situation. We might see these guys a little bit later in their 20s, and they might still provide a little bit for the Canadians down the road.
Yeah. And just because you're good enough to play in the NHL doesn't mean you should be playing in the NHL. Like Kotkaniemi, for instance, Gord Miller famously has talked about he should have gone back to Finland right away.
Yep.
Given him time to mature, that kind of thing. So let like Bergevin likes to say, let the young guys decide what's going to happen, but you have to have more of a longer term view. You can't be so myopic as I need a player here now, when you can just go out and sign some old guy. I know in this year he might be under the gun to make the playoffs to keep his job or feel like that's his legacy, but Bergevin is going to need to, or his successor is going to need to find some patience with the young guys, because again, maturing, giving them time, that's what's missing. So that's my 2 cents. You got any more?
No, I think we're more than ready for Kevin to come on here.
All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break. We're going to go to a commercial. And when we come back on the other side of that commercial break, we're going to be joined by Kevin Porter, a Toronto area firefighter and paramedic who is fighting, basically training and fighting to earn himself a professional hockey contract. So stick around. We'll be right back.